If you're looking for a recipe that's versatile and delicious, this streusel cake is just for you. I really like this recipe because it's flexible and simple to make. It's so quick, and you can use whatever is in season fruit-wise. So the supplies you'll need are a bowl for mixing the cake mix, another bowl for making the streusel topping. You'll need a 1 cup measuring cup and then a 1/4 cup. And you're also gonna need half a teaspoon and something to mix and scrape with. But what you wanna do is you're gonna start with preparing the pan to bake it in. And I already have the oven preheated. So here we have, we're gonna bake it in. Any 9 by 13 would be fine. You could probably split it up between 2 smaller ones too if you wanted to. But you're gonna spray with some sort of cooking spray, or you can butter it and flour it, but you just don't want it to stick in the pan. So here we go. And I'm gonna get a little flour in there. Move it around. And you just do this so it doesn't stick, the flour and the oil. And then when you have it floured and oiled, you put it to the side until you're ready for it. So over here, we're going to start with doing the cake part first. So we need 2 cups of just regular old flour. And I know that there's very precise people out there with baking, and unless I'm baking for my other job where I bake for a cafe, I don't worry about weighing stuff out if it's something that, you know, is a pretty simple cake. I have 2 cups of flour. I need 1 1/4 cup of sugar. I use a different measuring spoon because sometimes I make gluten-free things, so I don't want to get any gluten in here. 1 1/4. After that, I need a teaspoon of baking soda. I got the wrong one. I needed a teaspoon, not a half a teaspoon. We've got that. I'm going to need some salt. Oh, and that's why I had the half teaspoon out. I need it for the salt. Okay, half a teaspoon of salt. Then I'm going to mix them up. Those are all the dry ingredients. All right, so easy. Next, I'm going to do the eggs. I need 2 room temperature eggs. There's 1. And the other. And rinse those hands. And then I'm going to put in a cup of cream cheese. So I was given a whole bunch of cream cheese by somebody who had extras and they weren't going to use them in time. So I put them all in the freezer. So I've made this recipe a bunch of times and it works great with the frozen cream cheese, or not cream cheese, sorry, sour cream. Sour cream. You see how it gets like a little bit of like a different consistency? Okay, so I'm back to voiceover again because it got loud at the house. Right now what I'm doing is I am cracking the egg yolks and then mixing it in. You could take the eggs and put them in a separate bowl and then beat them together that way and then add them in, but that creates another bowl, and I think this works just fine. So right now I'm folding in the wet ingredients and the dry ingredients. And at a certain point, once you get them mostly mixed together, you can start just folding them in like this. That way you're not over mixing it. The batter will be a little bit on the dry side, but remember you are going to be adding in fruit a little bit later, so when it's baking, it won't be too dry when you're done with it. This is one of those recipes that is also very simple to make gluten-free. So I have a 1-to-1 gluten-free flour mix, and you could just substitute the regular flour for the gluten-free flour and it will be great. It's a really good recipe for that. I've made this cake now a bunch of different times, and sometimes I'll use just rhubarb. That's what the green stuff is in there. But this time I'm using rhubarb and raspberries. And I figured it was a good way to use what I had on hand. You could use this recipe with peaches during the summertime, apples for the fall. It's one of the things that I love about it so much. It comes together so quickly, and you can use whatever you have on hand. So I love a recipe like that. I'm trying not to overmix the batter because I don't want to break all the raspberries. So as long as all the dry ingredients are mixed together, that's fine. You don't need to keep going. Now I'm scraping the stuff in the bowl and putting it in the baking dish. And you can see how thick that batter is. So you're going to wind up having to spread it out in the baking dish. I've done some experiments with this dish. One of them was I tried freezing some of it to see what the texture would be like after it had defrosted. So I baked it and then cut a piece off, put it in the freezer, and tried it a few days later. And the cake itself, it was a great texture, but I think that the top, like the streusel topping that will come in a few minutes, it just lost some of its crispiness. It's one of the best parts of the cake is the topping. So while the taste was great, just expect that you'll lose some of that crispiness that's so nice with the streusel cake. The next step is to make the topping. So I'm going to get my other bowl and the butter that I have and the flour and the sugar and a little bit of cinnamon too. So I put the sugar and the flour in the bowl and then the butter in there as well. You want to use softened butter because hard butter can be a little bit difficult to incorporate. I forgot to take my butter out of the fridge and let it come to room temperature. So what I did is I put it by the stovetop. There's an area that's a little bit warm, and that helped to get it to room temperature. You don't want it to be melted. It's not supposed to be liquefied. You just don't want it to be rock hard either. And I learned of another trick to get butter up to room temperature quickly is you get a cup with warm water and put the stick of butter still wrapped in the cup of warm water, and it will help to soften it really quickly. So that's a little extra tip. I was so excited when I found that out. So I have all the ingredients in the bowl and I'm just cutting the butter into that. So what that means is you're just taking that stick of butter, trying to get it into smaller pieces and to mix it in with the flour, sugar, and cinnamon. You don't want it to be like a paste. You want it to be more like the texture of wet sand, a little bit crumbly, and you could just mix it until you get it to that point. You can see how quickly this dish comes together. It's less than 10 minutes to combine all the ingredients and get it ready to go into the oven. The only downside is that it has to cook for a long time, like 50 minutes, and that's not even that big a downside. Once you combine the streusel topping ingredients, you're going to start spreading it on top of the cake. So I usually use a fork or some utensil to make sure I'm spreading it evenly across the whole cake, making sure that it goes up to the edges and in the corners, and not allowing it to get too thick in any one spot. Like I said before, this recipe is really simple. It's really easy. I would just kind of call it foolproof. As you could see, I didn't have any special measuring tools. I didn't require a food scale to make this. You can use it with sour cream that you had frozen, so it's a good way to use that up. You can choose whatever type of fruit is seasonally available to you. There's not a bunch of different ingredients, and there's no tricky technique to making this cake. Also, this cake is pretty inexpensive. That's another reason to love this cake. So for all those reasons, I would highly recommend making this cake. I think you'll really enjoy it. Ooh, that was hot. So the cake itself is a nice soft cake underneath, and it has the fruit that's mixed throughout the whole cake. The topping has a light crispiness, and it's buttery and sugary and delicious. And it's a perfect cake. You could bring it to a party or a potluck. Whenever I've done that, people have really liked it, and a lot of times they'll ask for the recipe. So I hope that you get a chance to try this recipe and that you enjoy it as much as I have. If you have any creative variations on this recipe, I would love to know it. I'm always looking for a way to improve on any recipe that I have. If you try this, I hope that you enjoy it.